This is a law that goes way too far. Rules for you, but not for them. Hey everyone, Toby Leary here from the Civil Rights Coalition. I'm the chairman. Thank you for giving me your time today. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the misconceptions about Chapter 135 and why it should stay on the books as a good law. We did a video, I'll link to the description in this video, part one of this where I addressed the first 4 items on our opposition's website that says, why this law should remain a law. Now, number one, I don't want to discourage or disparage anyone on the other side who is there for all the right reasons. They just want to see crime go down in their communities. They want to see violence eradicated. They want to see negative outcomes with a firearm reduced. I'm there with you. We can all stand shoulder to shoulder in that. We all want to see bad people with guns be reduced or gone away with entirely. But we live in the real world. And I believe there's real world examples of how we can do that without having to infringe on people's right to keep and bear arms, and also on other fundamental rights like due process and Fourth Amendment protections and Fifth Amendment protections, etc. So this law, the Chapter 135 of the Acts of 2024, really does throw everything at the wall and hope it sticks. I believe that the whole bill is unconstitutional and will ultimately be sorted out in court. But frankly, that's an expensive and long and drawn out process that costs you, the taxpayer, tons of money, when really it shouldn't be done on the first place because it's unconstitutional on its face. We wouldn't tolerate any other right be treated the way the Second Amendment has been treated. And honestly, the focus is in the wrong area. In other words, trying to restrict lawful, peaceful people, what they can own, where they can carry, and how old they have to be, et cetera, is like trying to reduce drunk driving by making it harder for sober people to obtain a car or get a driver's license. It doesn't make sense if you're trying to reduce drunk driving, right? Let's get into it. So we went through the first 4. Now, number 5 on the website says, enhances gun violence data collection so we can identify the source of firearms in our most impacted communities. This is like number 4, which is taxpayer funding for studies with groups that have an agenda to take away your Second Amendment rights. I think it's pretty obvious that the people who commit violent crimes and acts with firearms should be punished accordingly. I will stand before the State House on any day of the week and say, yes, if you catch someone committing a violent act like we saw in Cambridge, that gentleman should have never been out of jail. He was trying to murder police officers just 5 years ago or in 2020, right? So that doesn't make sense to me. I think we can all agree that, yeah, he shouldn't have been out of jail. But unfortunately, the way the system is designed, a lot of people say, yeah, the system worked fine. He got to go to jail for 3 years. He got out of jail early, and he was able to obtain a gun. He didn't go to the local gun store, buy that gun, show a license to carry, and then pay a NFA tax to the federal government for his short-barreled rifle. No. What it proves is criminals don't abide by laws. So onerous regulations on lawful people don't make anybody safe. They also give a free pass to the most violent criminal element in society in things like wanting to reduce cash bail and also wanting to make sure that there's no mandatory minimums for any crime. This is the agenda, unfortunately, on the table. Number 6, bans devices and modifications that turn semi-automatic weapons into fully automatic machine guns. If you didn't use the laws on the books prior to 2024 to convict and put people in jail for illegally making machine guns, what's one more law going to do? That's part of the problem we see with the enactment of Chapter 135. It basically takes laws that they already weren't enforcing and doubles down on them, saying, we're really going to enforce them now. No, you're not, because you have a proven track record of not doing that. So again, all this does is make something that was already illegal, illegal. How is that a good use of taxpayer dollars and funds? It's not. In fact, federally, people who do this go to jail for long periods of time. So I don't see what the point of passing a 116-page omnibus bill is if you just want to address a device that turns a semi-automatic weapon into a machine gun. Do it as a separate bill. It's already illegal. You already don't enforce that law, so now that you've doubled down on it, are you going to doubly not enforce it? I digress. You see the point. They didn't enforce it before. They're not going to enforce it now. It's a feel-good scare tactic to get you, the voter, to think, oh my gosh, this is a good idea. Yeah, no one wants gangbangers running around with machine guns, me included, by the way. And there was already laws on the books to address that. You didn't need to pass onerous regulations on lawful people in order to accomplish that. Number 7, prohibits the carrying of firearms in polling places and government buildings. This has a serious implication. We have 251 years of history of being able to go pay your taxes, and if you carry a gun for lawful reasons and for defensive purposes, you didn't have to do something that makes us all less safe. What is that? Lock your gun in your car while you go in to pay your taxes. Or maybe you go to the dump, or maybe you go to a town meeting. The point I'm trying to make is there's never been an issue with this in Massachusetts history. It is a solution in search of a problem. It sounds good to make people think, oh my gosh, yeah, we can't carry guns in municipal buildings, but they've been able to do that for 250 years without a problem. And now we just addressed the criminal element doesn't abide by laws. They're not going to be dissuaded by your signs. They don't care what sign you post. And now you're making the municipal employees less safe because now they can't carry a gun to work. And they aren't going to treat this as a true gun-free zone like an airport or a federal building or the state house where they have metal detectors and armed people at the site. No, now the clerks, the municipal employees are left defenseless because they can't legally carry a gun, and we all know what the criminal does to the laws that people on Beacon Hill create. They ignore them. So you just made an entire government group of people so much less safe. Number 8, ensures gun dealers are inspected annually and accurately. This goes back to the other issue. It was already a law on the books. And by the way, gun dealers get inspected by the federal government and the state and local government. This isn't something that, slips through the cracks. We're not required to do things by law. If we didn't do business according to the law, we would be out of business tomorrow. There's no question about it. And this is, again, another way of saying there's some sort of nefarious intent going on at gun stores that we need to make sure we keep an eye on. No, that isn't what's going on. What's going on is now you just burden the taxpayer again and are requiring extra steps to do what they were already required to do. And that's what I would like to wrap this video up saying. The perfect example of how this is do as I say, not as I do, is Chapter 135 was passed under the worst type of conditions. The process was broken from start to finish. And number 2, once they saw that the democratic process was taking place in the state of Massachusetts, 100,000 people came together at the grassroots level, signed a petition, says, this goes too far, we're not going to comply, and want to repeal this law. The governor steps in and signs an emergency preamble 71 days after signing it into law, which makes it go into effect immediately and makes it so that the citizens of Massachusetts, we the people, the true fountain of power, as Madison wrote in Federalist 49, their voice was silenced. It was a threat to democracy that was taking place in the state of Massachusetts. And that law should have been suspended up until November 3rd, 2026, when you, the voter, will get a chance to speak on this by going into the polling place and voting. And after signing it into law, and then signing an emergency preamble with no emergent conditions that facilitated the need for the preamble, They suspended entire portions of the law for 18 months because they couldn't fund it and they didn't have the mechanisms in place to implement it. So if that isn't just a authoritarian audacity to say you need to comply with the law, but we don't need to comply with the law, I don't know what is. It's a terrible example of how government sometimes feels like they know more than you, and they don't have to abide by the law. And by the way, what happens if the local municipalities don't inspect local gun shops? Nothing. Just like when the state police was required after the emergency preamble was signed to implement a new licensing scheme, they didn't. They suspended it for 18 months. So rules for you, but not for them. This is a law that goes way too far. It severely restricts your constitutionally enumerated rights. And I think we can all agree, all rights are worth defending, and never should politicians on Beacon Hill be able to usurp those rights with a simple majority vote. I'm Toby Leary. Please go to thecivilrightscoalition.com for more information. You can sign up to volunteer, you can donate, you can subscribe to our newsletter, you can attend one of our upcoming events, and I would love to see you online. So join us on our show, Rapid Fire Radio, every Tuesdays and Thursdays. We talk about this stuff all the time. And maybe you don't agree with me, sound off in the comments about why. I'd love to have a logical discussion with you as well. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.